Love cannot cure loneliness. It can only soothe it. It is late enough that the city has stopped pretending. The streetlights have that hollow glow. Not warm, not cold, just present, like hospital corridors that never fully sleep. Somewhere below, a bus exhales against a curb. A bottle rolls down a gutter with the casual patience of something no one is coming to collect. The air is thin and sharp, the kind that makes every sound feel closer than it should. Even is walking home, jacket zipped to the chin. Hands in pockets, phone heavy like a small animal pressed against his thigh. He passes a convenience store, one of those places that exists at the intersection of necessity and loneliness. The automatic door sighs open. Fluorescent light floods the pavement like a confession no one asked for. Inside, the hum of refrigerators, the crackle of plastic packaging, the slow drip of coffee into a metal pot. He buys something warm, not because he is hungry, but because his hands need a purpose. A paper cup, a plastic lid that clicks into place with a small, satisfying seal, proof that something's still closed properly. He steps back into the cold. The phone buzzes. A message from her. "Hey, you up?" 3 words, and something in his chest shifts. Not dramatically, not like the movies. More like a lock turning 1 click. A door that was braced now slightly ajar. He types back. Something light. Something that doesn't betray how much that small line of text just rearranged his internal weather. They've been seeing each other for a few months. Not long enough to feel permanent, long enough to feel dangerous. She replies. A voice note. He puts in one earbud and hears her laugh at something her roommate said. Then, anyway, I just wanted to hear your voice before I fell asleep. That is all. The night is exactly as cold as it was 30 seconds ago, but it feels different. This is what love does. It doesn't change the temperature. It changes your ability to bear it. And for a few minutes, walking home with her voice in one ear and the city in the other, Evan feels that ancient, wordless thing we all feel when someone reaches across the dark and says, I thought of you. Here is where the story could end. If we wanted it to be simple, boy meets girl. Girl soothes the ache. Credits roll. But the story doesn't end, because 3 hours later, Evan is lying in bed next to her. She came over. She is curled against his side, her breathing slow and steady, and the ache is back. Not because she did anything wrong. Not because the evening wasn't good. It was good. The conversation was easy. The silence was comfortable. She fell asleep with her hand on his chest, and for a moment, looking at her face in the dark, he felt a wave of something so tender it almost hurt. And then, quietly, like water rising in a basement you forgot to check. The hollow. Not sadness. Not loneliness in the way people usually mean it. Not the absence of someone. Something stranger. A feeling that has no clean word in any language because it was never meant to be spoken. Only carried. Have you been here before? Lying next to someone who chose you. Someone who showed up, who stayed, who pressed their body against yours. Not out of obligation, but out of genuine desire to be close. And still feeling a gap. A low hum beneath the music of your life together. Not loud enough to name. Not sharp enough to call a crisis. Just persistent, like a frequency only you can hear. UV probably tried to explain it. And UV watched their face shift. From concern to confusion to something that looks like hurt. Because when you say I feel alone, and you are clearly not alone, people hear it as an accusation. They hear, you are not enough. But that is not what you mean. What you mean is something far stranger. You are enough. You are everything I asked for. And the loneliness is still here. This is the confession no one makes at dinner parties. No one posts it between the anniversary photos and the couple's getaway reels. Because it sounds ungrateful. It sounds broken. But what if you are not broken? What if the ache you feel is not a malfunction but a signal? What if loneliness was never a problem to be solved by another person, but a permanent condition of being a self? What if love was never designed to cure it? What if love's real job, its only honest job, was to make the loneliness survivable? It is not a cure, it is a cradle. Stay with me, because tonight we're not going to fix you. We're going to tell you the truth. Here is something no one told you in biology class. Your brain, the 3 pounds of wet electricity between your ears, was not designed for the world you live in. It was designed for a world that no longer exists. Small fires, smaller tribes. A world where being separated from the group didn't mean scrolling through your phone at midnight. It meant death. For your ancestors, isolation was not a feeling, it was a death sentence. A human alone was a human exposed. No shelter, no shared warmth, no extra pair of eyes scanning the tree line. Evolution didn't care about your emotional well-being. It cared about keeping you breathing. And the most efficient way to keep you breathing was to make aloneness feel like an emergency. That is what loneliness is. Not a mood, not a character flaw. A neurological alarm system, ancient, involuntary, and breathtakingly blunt. Psychologist James Cone calls this social baseline theory. The idea is both simple and brutal. Your brain doesn't treat social connection as a bonus. It treats it as infrastructure, as load-bearing architecture. When you have people you trust nearby, your brain spends less energy scanning for threats. It delegates. It relaxes. It says, in the wordless language of cortisol and glucose, someone else is watching the perimeter tonight. I can rest. But when you are alone, even when you are physically safe, even when the door is locked and the fridge is full, your brain doesn't fully register the safety. The old alarm tends to fire anyway. Stress markers rise. Threat processing networks become more reactive. The part of you that plans and reasons and stays calm can feel harder to access. Not always. Not in the same way for everyone. But often enough to be measurable. It is not weakness. It is wiring. So love, when it arrives, feels like relief. Not in a mystical way, in a metabolic way. When someone holds you, when someone responds reliably, when you hear a familiar voice say, I am here, your nervous system can downshift. You don't have to carry the full weight alone. Psychologists call this co-regulation, two nervous systems influencing each other, state. A calm presence softening a stressed one, a steady voice lowering someone. Escard. This is one of love, as most real and measurable gifts. But here is where it gets cruel. There is a phenomenon called hedonic adaptation. It is the reason the apartment you dreamed of feels ordinary after 6 months. The reason the salary that once seemed impossible now barely registers. And it is the reason the person who once made your heart race at the sound of a notification now makes you feel calm, safe, present but not electric. This isn't a tragedy. Calm is beautiful. Comfort is rare. But adaptation strips away the anesthesia. The dopamine haze of early love fades. The oxytocin settles into a hum instead of a roar. And underneath it, patient, unmoved exactly where you left it. The ache is still there, not because your partner failed, not because the love isn't real, because the loneliness was never just about the absence of a person. And this is where it gets existential. Your brain has a network that activates when you are not focused on the outside world. When you are lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, drifting in the space between thoughts. Neuroscientists call it the default mode network. It is the brain's storyteller. The place where you construct your sense of self, replay the past, rehearse the future, and ask the questions that have no answers. Who am I? Really? Does anyone truly know me? Is this all there is? The DMN is not the enemy. It is the meaning maker. It is how you reflect, learn, grow. But when you are exhausted or emotionally raw, the meaning maker can become merciless. It stops reflecting and starts prosecuting. It replays conversations. It audits silences. It asks questions that sound like logic but feel like punishment. This network doesn't care that someone is lying next to you. It doesn't care that you said, I love you before bed and meant it. It takes you inward, past the comfort of your relationship, past the warmth of another body, and it pulls you toward the one place no one else can follow, the center of your own consciousness. Even at your most loved, there remains an inner distance no one can fully cross. At the level of neural architecture, you are, and have always been, alone in your own experience. No one else can feel your specific shade of sadness. No one else can hear the exact pitch of your internal silence. Love can bring another person close, achingly close, but it cannot cross that final gap. Some loneliness is social. You need more connection. Some is personal. You've lost touch with yourself, but one kind is deeper. One kind is structural, and that kind doesn't care about your relationship status. It is not emptiness. It is a boundary. It is not a cure. It is a cradle. So if loneliness is hardwired, if it lives in the architecture of the brain, then you expect the culture to acknowledge it. To say plainly, this is part of being human, and no single relationship will make it disappear. But the culture doesn't say that. The culture says, find your person. It says it in every romantic comedy that ends at the wedding, as if the story is over once two people choose each other. It says it in every pop song that resolves the bridge with a reunion. It says it in the way someone asks gently but persistently, are you seeing anyone? As though your completeness is a question only another person can answer. The sociologist Zygmunt Bauman called this the age of liquid love, a world where relationships have become consumer products. We scroll, compare, filter by preference, always vaguely aware that a better option might be one swipe away. And when we finally choose, we load that choice with an expectation no single human can bear. Think about what we ask of a modern partner: best friend, therapist, lover, co-parent, financial ally, emotional anchor, spiritual mirror. The psychotherapist Esther Perel has pointed out that this is historically unprecedented. For most of human history, these needs were distributed across a village, extended family, neighbors, elders, religious community, childhood friends, you kept for life. No one person was expected to carry all of it. Now we hand one human the full weight of our existential aloneness, gift wrapped in the language of romance, and say, hold this for me. And when they buckle, not because they re-weak, but because the load was never designed for one pair of shoulders, we say the relationship failed. We say we chose wrong. It is not that love is failing, it is that love is overloaded. Psychology has a name for the need being outsourced: relatedness, one of the three basic psychological needs identified in self-determination theory. Alongside autonomy and competence, humans require a sense of belonging to remain psychologically stable. Not optional, not a luxury, a need. When that need is met only through one relationship, when the rest of the social ecosystem has thinned out, that relationship becomes a pressure cooker. Every silence feels heavier. Every distance feels personal. Every unanswered text carries the weight of an entire unmet infrastructure. And now add the screen. Social media didn't invent loneliness, but it learned to monetize the ache. Open any platform. ULL find couples performing intimacy like choreography. The surprise airport pickup filmed from 3 angles. The handwritten letter read aloud with tears on cue. The anniversary reel with the swelling piano track. It is beautiful. It is moving. And it is constructing, frame by frame, a collective hallucination that love looks like the absence of loneliness, and the platforms don't just show you intimacy, they deliver it intermittently. Just enough to keep your nervous system reaching. Social psychologist Leon Festinger called this social comparison theory. We evaluate ourselves relative to others, especially when our own standards are unclear. And in a world saturated with curated intimacy, you are constantly exposed to evidence that everyone else found the cure, that you missed the lesson, that you are behind, so you search harder. Optimize yourself, perform more. Treat love as an acquisition that will finally solve the underlying ache. But love was never designed to do that. Imagine you break a bone. It is deep, structural, painful. Someone hands you the most beautiful bandage ever made. Silk, hand-sewn, exquisite. You wrap it around the break. It looks perfect. It feels like care. But underneath the silk, the bone is still fractured. The bandage didn't fail. It was never meant to set a bone. Love is the bandage. The bone is yours. And when you demand that the bandage become a cast, a splint, an entire orthopedic surgery, you don't get better healing. You get a relationship that can breathe, because love cannot breathe inside a demand to cure. Love becomes anxious. Love becomes performance. Love becomes surveillance. Did you reply fast enough? Did you say it right? Are you still there? Am I still safe? That is not intimacy. That is a nervous system, running quality control on its only remaining source of regulation. A love that is asked to be everything, not because it isn't real, because the expectation was never realistic. It is not a ship. It is a port. A port can shelter you from storms. It can keep you safe for a time. It can let you repair, refuel, rest. But it cannot become the ocean. It cannot abolish the fact that you will sometimes be at sea. And you will sometimes be at sea. Not because something went wrong, because you are alive. So here we are. The alarm 1T stop ringing. The bandage can T-set the bone. The person next to you, no matter how much they love you, cannot follow you into the innermost room of your own experience. This is the part where you expect to fix. A framework, 5 steps to conquer the ache. I am not going to do that, because the greatest thinkers who wrestled with this didn't conquer it either. They did something more radical. They accepted it. The existential psychotherapist Irvin Yalom spent decades sitting with patients who carried the same unspoken question Evan carries in his chest. Why do I still feel alone? His answer was not a technique. It was a reframe that changes everything once you hear it. Yalom describes something called existential isolation, a fundamental separateness that cannot be eliminated. Even in deep love, you cannot fully enter another person's subjective world. You can get close, breathtakingly close, but there is always a remainder, a sealed door. This is not a failure of love. This is the condition of love. Because if there were no gap, there would be no reaching across. No yearning, no tenderness. Tenderness exists precisely because we cannot fully reach each other. And we try anyway. It is not a flaw. It is the foundation. And this reframe doesn't just sit in philosophy. It has roots in developmental psychology. Donald Winnicott, one of the most quietly revolutionary psychologists of the 20th century, described something he called the capacity to be alone. He argued that true psychological maturity includes the ability to be alone without falling apart, not because you don't need anyone, but because you carry an internal sense of continuity, a quiet trust that you still exist even when no one is watching. And here is the beautiful part. Winnicott said this capacity is not built in isolation. It is built through being alone in the presence of another. A child plays while a caregiver is nearby. Not interfering. Not smothering, simply there, and the child internalizes, I can be myself, and the world 1T disappear. That is the foundational miracle. And it tells us something both tragic and hopeful. The opposite of loneliness is not constant company. The opposite of loneliness is internal safety. Now, before this gets turned into a slogan, this is not, you need to love yourself first. That phrase has been weaponized into a moral test, as if loneliness is punishment for insufficient self-improvement. That is not what this is. This is simpler, quieter. This is the recognition that no relationship, no matter how good, can erase the border between minds, and that the border is not a wall. It is a shoreline. In 1903, the poet Rainer Maria Rilke wrote a letter that has outlived nearly every love poem of its century. He said, "The highest form of love is to be the protector of another person's solitude, not the destroyer of it, not the replacement for it, the protector." Rilke understood what most love songs never will. Your solitude is not the enemy of your relationship. It is the ground it grows in, the deepest parts of who you are. Your unnamed longings, your private griefs, the way you see light fall through a window and feel something you'll never be able to fully articulate. These exist in a place that belongs only to you. A love that tries to colonize that place is not a deeper love. It is a more frightened one. Real love meets the border and stays. Jung called the journey inward individuation. The process of integrating the fragmented parts of the self instead of demanding that someone else hold them together. It is not about becoming a hermit. It is about becoming whole enough that you can love from fullness rather than from lack. But individuation requires something terrifying, sitting with the loneliness instead of running from it. Not medicating it with another person's presence, not scrolling past it, simply being with it, the way you de-sit with a wound that aches when the weather changes, acknowledging it, respecting it, refusing to pretend it isn't there. And when you do, when you stop running and turn to face the hollow, something shifts. The hollow doesn't devour you. It becomes a room, a quiet private room at the center of your being. And in that room you find not emptiness, but everything you are when you are not performing. Your unedited thoughts, your real grief, your unpolished joy. 2 lighthouses, standing on opposite cliffs, shining across a dark and endless sea. The sea is always there. The distance is always real. But the light is a choice. It is not a void, it is a border. And love doesn't erase the border. Love illuminates it. It is not a cure, it is a cradle morning. The light comes in at an angle that makes the bedroom look kinder than it did at 3 a.m. She is still asleep, one arm tucked under the pillow, her face half hidden, her breathing the only sound in the room. Evan lies still for a moment. The ache from last night hasn't vanished. Of course it hasn't. It is still there. The way a deep lake is still there even when the surface is calm. But something about it has shifted. Not in size, in meaning. He is not prosecuting himself for it anymore. Psychology has a frame for this. James Gross calls it emotion regulation, the process of influencing which emotions we have when we have them and how we experience them. A crucial part of growing up is learning that emotions are not problems to delete. They are signals to interpret. Loneliness is a signal. Sometimes it means you need more connection. Call a friend. Sit with a stranger. Join something. Show up somewhere. Sometimes it means you need rest. Sometimes it means you've been performing for so long you've forgotten what your own voice sounds like. And sometimes it simply means you are a conscious being sealed inside one skull, carrying a universe no one else can fully enter. That is not a diagnosis. That is a description. Kristin Neff, the psychologist who studies self-compassion, describes something she calls common humanity, the recognition that your suffering is not yours alone, that your loneliness is not a personal verdict, not a unique defect. It is the same loneliness felt by the stranger on the train, by the friend who never mentions it, by the person sleeping next to you right now. If you are lonely, it does not mean you are unworthy. It means you are a person, and every person carries this. It is not failure, it is reality. And once you stop asking love to abolish reality, something paradoxical happens. Love gets lighter. You stop demanding that your partner permanently remove your solitude. You stop auditing every silence for evidence that something is wrong. You stop turning intimacy into surveillance. And the relationship can finally breathe. Because love cannot breathe inside a demand to cure. But love can breathe inside honesty. Inside this truth, I will sometimes be lonely, even when I am loved. I will sometimes feel the gap, even when someone is close. And none of that makes the love less real. It makes the love human. Evan looks at her face, sees the small crease between her eyebrows. Even in sleep, she carries something. Everyone does. Everyone has their own stone, their own 3 a.m., their own version of this exact moment, where the world goes quiet, and the self gets loud and there is nowhere left to hide. He puts his hand, very gently, on her back, not to take anything from her, not to receive anything, just to say, in the only language that matters before the morning starts, I know you are in there. I am in here too. And the space between us is uncrossable, but I am reaching across it anyway. This is what love is, not the absence of loneliness, the refusal to let loneliness have the final word. A cradle doesn't pretend the night will disappear. It holds you while the night passes, and maybe that is the real miracle. Not that love saves you from being a self, but that it meets you there, at the border in the exile, in the room no one else can fully enter. It waits, it watches, it stays. Love cannot cure loneliness. It can only soothe it. It is not a cure, it is a cradle. The room stays quiet. The light keeps arriving. He lets himself breathe, and somehow, against all the loneliness that logic says should win, that is enough.